We rolled already, and then my video cut out at like 10 seconds. So we already have our lines figured out and everything. Apparently I didn't realize it wasn't recording. We have 58 as our primary hexagram, and we have 60 as our supporting. We'll be getting the titles for our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. Hexagram 58 is joy, communion of the inward and the outward, joy in practicing the Tao. And the supporting hexagram 60, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, discipline, being able to be joyful even in trouble, practicing obedience in trying circumstances, adaptably keeping to the Tao. We'll start by reading from Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is a nice introductory I Ching commentary. I highly recommend picking up a copy. Hexagram 58, was it? Hilary Barrett calls opening. Key questions. How can you fully enjoy the moment? What are you bringing to expression? What if you communicated and exchanged more freely? Oracle. Opening, creating success. Constancy bears fruit. The early Chinese character for opening shows someone with words rising from their mouth. They seem to be dancing and singing. It means joyful and outgoing expression that opens up communication. Opening brings people together and begins a lively creative process of sharing and exchange. It liberates human energies, motivates people to overcome hardship, and encourages perseverance. Image: lakes join together, opening. A noble one joins with friends to speak and practice together. Two joined lakes open to one another, flow together freely and enrich one another. The same is true of friends who join together to discuss and share their understanding. The exchange of ideas and pooling of insights makes everyone richer. Reminds me of how Roland rolls, the children's story I just read. Joining together waves. Sequence: opening follows from hexagram 57, subtly penetrating. Entering in and then rejoicing, and so opening follows. You subtly penetrate things and know them from the inside. Then you bring things out and express them with joy, taking delight in the freedom to interact and connect. And hexagram 60, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 60, Hilary Barrett calls measuring. Key questions: what limits apply here? What agreements are at work? Does everyone understand them and find them palatable? Do you? Oracle: measuring, creating success. Bitter measures do not allow for constancy. Who's this dude? With something going on. Oh, a magnifying glass and a staff? Or a measuring rod? Interesting. Things need to be articulated to make them more manageable, easier to take in and work with. Such measures, when they grow organically, reflect the natural rhythms of life and allow a fuller participation in its flow. Progress is made in small increments. Individuals with measure live sustainably and flourish. Groups who share measures and standards, who speak the same language, can reach agreement and build trust. But if anyone reacts to the measures as they would to a bitter taste, if they find them too hard to swallow, then they are not sustainable. This isn't a matter of tradition, principle, or logic, but of human experience. Image: above the lake is the stream, measuring. A noble one works out and reckons the measures, reflecting on character in action. The streams flow into the lake and out from it, but how much water can the lake hold? Or how many channels can we dig leading out from it before there is insufficient water to reach our fields? A noble one will work out these limits to capacity and flow by discovering what works in practice. He is like the lake that reflects and deepens, and like the streams that flow out and reveal a character's depth and resource through action. Sequence: measuring follows from hexagram 59, dispersing. Things cannot end with spreading out, and so measuring follows. When artificial limits have dissolved away, it's time to develop organic, authentic ones. People need boundaries. We will go back to our changing line 4, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here's some places you may find yourself. Takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 has its own general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. When we have a question that we bring to the I Ching, when we consult the oracle, that question will have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Hexagram 58, changing line 4. Negotiating opening, not yet at rest. Containing the affliction brings rejoicing. You're considering and discussing a change, and you want to settle all the details before you commit yourself, so you can be sure of how things will work and more confident that you're making the right decision. You're also under great pressure to decide. This magnifies your restlessness into deep anxiety. Unless you set some limits to this, it will tend to take over and turn the negotiations into obsessive haggling. If you rest secure in the knowledge of what you want and need, you can reach your decision calmly in your own time. You'll also find that participating in the interplay of negotiation enriches you, and the dance of exchange is something you can enjoy. We will next look at what I-ming has to say in his Taoist I Ching, written in 1796, while he was a Taoist adept. It's highly alchemical in nature. Hexagram 58, joy. Joy is developmental, beneficial if correct. Explanation. Joy is delight. In the body of the hexagram, 2 yangs are below, 1 yin is above, empty without, fulfilled within. It is represented as a body of water, and its quality is joy. As water provides moisture for myriad beings, joy develops myriad beings. Joyful within and without, reaching the outer from within, communicating with the inner from without. Inside and outside are conjoined, without separation between them. Therefore it is called joy. This hexagram represents joy in practicing the Tao. It follows on the preceding hexagram, travel. Travel involves applying understanding with stability, so that understanding is not misused, having one's will on the Tao, so that no external things can move it. Having one's will on the Tao is finding joy in the Tao. When one delights in the Tao, then one can practice the Tao. This is why joy is developmental. However, though joy is developmental on the path, it is only beneficial if correct. When it is correct, it is beneficial, and one consummates one's joy. If incorrect, it is not beneficial, and one loses one's joy. As in the image of the hexagram, with joy above and below, the 6 lines are parallel. The lower joy is inward joy, the upper joy is outer joy. When inward joy is fulfilled, outer joy is also fulfilled. And when inward joy is empty, outer joy is also empty. Fulfillment here means reality of joy. Emptiness means falsehood of joy. Reality means joy endures. Falsehood means joy does not last long. Herein lies the benefit of correctness. People who practice the Tao really correctly do not delight in objects of the senses, in wealth and gain. They delight in benevolence, justice, and the qualities of the Tao. So naturally they have real joy and do not strive for artificial joy. Thus every step proceeds from the work they apply to the essence and life of body and mind. Joyful in the beginning, they can naturally complete the end. So joy always develops, and the development is always beneficial. And our supporting hexagram 60 puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, discipline. Discipline is developmental, but painful discipline is not to be held to. Explanation. Discipline means having limits that are not to be exceeded. As to the qualities of the hexagram, above is water, a pitfall, and below is lake, joyous. Being capable of joy in danger, warding off danger by joyfulness, it is therefore called discipline. This hexagram represents practicing obedience in unfavorable circumstances, adaptably keeping to the Tao. It follows on the previous hexagram, joy. In joy, joyfulness reaches outside. One can delight in the Tao and practice the Tao. But if one can only be joyful in favorable circumstances and not in unfavorable circumstances, joy is not real. And ultimately, it will be hard to get out of difficulty and danger, so one will not find joy. Therefore, those who practice reality and delight in the Tao do not let difficulty disturb their minds, and do not let peril and trouble affect their will. The situation may be dangerous, but their minds are not endangered. The times may be perilous, but the Tao is not imperiled. Pleased with heaven and aware of the aim of life, they are at peace wherever they are. They use danger to nourish joy and use joy to guard against danger. The situation may be up to others, but creation of destiny is up to oneself. Yin and Yang cannot restrict such people. The created universe cannot bind them. Whether in adversity or comfort, they do not lose their bearings. This is why discipline is developmental. However, even though discipline can develop you, if you do not know how to adapt to changes and cling fast to one discipline, that will become restrictive and stifling. This is called painful discipline. When discipline gets to the point of inflicting suffering, it brings on danger itself, even where there was no danger. You will only suffer toil and servility, which is harmful and has no benefit. Not only does this not constitute discipline, it loses the appropriate measure. This is not joy in the midst of danger, it is enjoying the act of courting danger. Therefore, it is not to be held to. When superior people practice the Tao and establish virtue, they don't act in any way that is not just. Their every step is orderly and regulated. Their every word is timely and reasonable. In substance, they are always calm, like a lake without waves. In function, they act like water, which conforms to its environment. Their calmness does not reach the point of losing mindfulness, and their activity does not reach the point of straying from essence. There is a consistency about their movement and stillness, adjusted appropriately according to events, not restricted to a single pattern. When the time comes to stop, they stop. Encountering danger, they deal with it. When the time comes to go on, they go on. Getting out of danger, they do not bring on danger. Going along with the time, they deal with everything unminding, and therefore can get beyond yin and yang, not being constrained by yin and yang. This is because heaven and earth can coerce what has form, but not what is formless, can coerce the minding, but not the unminding. Discipline is not according to mind, but according to time. This is called discipline according to the time, having discipline, yet according with the time. It is like the sections of bamboo. Each section has a boundary. Each section has a passage. In this way, how could one fail to develop? We will next take a look at the changing line 4 of our primary hexagram 58 Joy, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. Takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 has the general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. Oops. Hexagram 58, Joy, changing line 4. Joy after deliberation. If one is firm and wary without complacency, there will be happiness. Explanation. Using strength flexibly, speaking only after deliberation, acting only after consideration, affecting the intended events with deliberation and consideration, this is called joy after deliberation. When joy is deliberate, one does not dare to submit to joy, but is careful and wary, not complacent, not acting improperly, as if seriously ill, Eventually, there will be happiness, and one will be able to consummate one's joy. We'll also take a look at the commentary section for each of our hexagrams 58 and 60. Hexagram 58, joy, lake above, lake below. Joined lakes are joyful, thus do superior people explain and practice with companions. Joy means the joy of harmony. Above and below is lake. This is two lakes joined together, providing each other with water. This is the image of joy. What superior people see in this is that the Tao of nature and life is most profound, and the slightest slip causes a tremendous loss. So they expound and practice it with companions. Companions are people of like mind on the same path. Principles are not clear without explanation. Explanation is not thorough without practice. Companions explain to each other and practice what is explained by each other, discussing back and forth, pursuing their investigation into the Tao in the process of this interaction, entering deeply into it and advancing far on it, finally reaching attainment. The reason for this is that the knowledge of one person is limited, whereas the views of many people are endless. When there is something one does not know oneself, one needs companions to explain and clarify it. By this mutual explanation and practice, those who do not know will come to know, and those without mastery will gain it. Inwardly understanding and outwardly acting in accord with that understanding, there is no doubt that one will reach the stage of profound attainment of self-realization. And our supporting hexagram 60, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. In the back here with the commentary section, it's called regulation. Water above, lake below. There is water over a lake, regulated. Thus, superior people determine measures and discuss virtuous actions. Regulation means having limits. Above is water, below is lake. There is water over a lake. There is a limit to which a lake can hold water. If there is too much water, the lake overflows. This is the image of regulation. What superior people see in this is that establishment of virtue is the basis of everything that people should do or not do, and they should not act arbitrarily. This is called regulation. However, there is a way of changing adaptively according to the situation. If one holds to one regulation to the end, one's practice will not be successful, but will instead damage one's character. Therefore, regulations must be distinguished, so superior people determine measures to discuss virtuous actions. The 365 days of a year is one of 4 ways of measurement. The yearly cycle is also divided into 4 seasons, 8 divisions, and 72 periods, each with its boundaries. These are measures. People are born with certain measures of earthly and celestial energies of the 5 elements, so they have the virtues of the 5 elements. When they act without losing those virtues, that is virtuous action. Superior people determine the measures of waxing and waning of the earthly and celestial 5 elements and discuss the virtuous actions of benevolence, justice, courtesy, knowledge, and truthfulness. This is to cause people to be benevolent when it is appropriate to be benevolent, to be just when it is appropriate to be just, to be courteous when it is appropriate to be courteous, to be knowing when it is appropriate to be knowing, and to be truthful when it is appropriate to be truthful. They also discuss how the 5 virtues are one energy, how the earthly and the celestial work together without bias or partiality. This is because they want people to embody the virtues of heaven and earth as their own qualities and the process of the 4 seasons as their own conduct. The science of nature and life is a process of work that is entirely a matter of the measure of evolution. If you conform to the appropriate measure, you can cultivate celestial qualities. This is virtuous action. If you lose the proper measure, you turn away from celestial qualities. This is the demise of virtue. Actions that destroy virtue are actions without regulation, taking the false to be real, taking what is wrong to be right. Even if you can hold fast to one regulation, this still is sticking to voidness or clinging to form, and ultimately is of no benefit to nature and life. The intention of superior people in determining this and discussing this so as to enlighten people and fulfill their work was profound indeed. Next, we will take a look at what James Dekorne, in his Gnostic Book of Changes, says about the matter. He is a practitioner of the Tao himself and has helpful editor's notes throughout, a synthesis of other I Ching commentaries, a lot of them, some of the more famous ones, or common, I don't know. They're good ones. Scholarly. 58. Joy, self-indulgence is what James Dekorne calls our primary hexagram. Other titles might be the joyous, joyousness, pleased satisfaction, encouraging, delight, open, usurpation, self-indulgence, pleasure, cheerfulness, frivolity, or callow optimism. I've left links in the description box for James Dekorne's Gnostic Book of Changes. If you want to follow along, totally would be able to do that. Leg, joy intimates that under its conditions there will be progress and attainment, but it will be advantageous to be firm and correct. This is under the judgment. Wilhelm/Baines, the joyous, success. Perseverance is favorable. Blowful, joy, success. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Lu, joyousness, success. Continuance is favorable. Ritzema/Karcher, open, growing, harvesting trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of interaction and exchange. It emphasizes that stimulating things through cheering and persuasive speech, the action of open, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to stimulate. Clary 1. Joy is developmental, beneficial if correct. This hexagram represents joy in practicing the Tao. Having one's will in the Tao is finding joy in the Tao. When one delights in the Tao, then one can practice the Tao. This is why joy is developmental. The image, leg. Two images of waters of a marsh, one over the other, form joy. The superior man, in accordance with this, encourages the conversation of friends and the stimulus of their common practice. Wilhelm/Baines, lakes resting on one another, the image of the joyous. Thus, the superior man joins with his friends for discussion and practice. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes two bodies of water conjoined. The superior man joins his friends in discussions and in practicing the various arts and virtues. Lu, the beautiful lakes symbolize joyousness. The superior man joins his fellows for teaching and study. Ritzema/Karcher, congregating marshes, open. A chansu, or chief son or superior person, uses partnering friends to explicate repeating. Cleary 1, joined lakes are joyful, thus do superior people explain and practice with companions. As water provides moisture for myriad beings, joy develops myriad beings. Joyful within and without, reaching the outer from within, communicating with the inner from without. Inside and outside are conjoined, without separation between them, therefore it is called joy. Commentary, Confucius/Lake, joy has the meaning of pleased satisfaction. We have the dynamic lines in the center and the magnetic lines on the outer edge of the two trigrams, indicating that in pleasure, what is most advantageous is the maintenance of firm correctness. Through this, there will be found an accordance with the will of heaven, and a correspondence with the feelings of men. When such pleasure goes before the people and leads them on, they forget their toils. When it animates them in encountering difficulties, they forget the risk of death. How great is the power of this pleased satisfaction, stimulating in such a way the people. Leg. The feeling of pleasure is the subject of this hexagram, which is made up of the doubled trigram of cheerfulness, or pleased satisfaction. The progress and attainment of the figure are due to the one magnetic line surmounting each trigram and supported by the two dynamic lines. The idea is that of mildness, which is energized by a double portion of strength. The pleasure which leads the people to endure toil and risk death is the effect of the instructive example of their ruler. Fu Fan Hsien paraphrases this portion of the text as, when the sage with this precedes them, he can make them endure toil without any wish to decline it, and go with him into difficulty and danger without their having any fear. Anthony. This hexagram speaks on the one hand of that on which true joy depends, and on the other of joy as desire, which leads to conflict. The essence of true joy is inner stability. Being firmly devoted to our path, we do not waver. When we think of the soft and comfortable path, on the other hand, self-conflict begins. Therefore, getting this hexagram indicates that we may be wavering or irresolute. Notes and paraphrases judgment. A cheerful attitude serves the will. The superior man shares his thoughts and feelings, or, psychologically interpreted, observes, weighs, and integrates his thoughts with his feelings. The title of this hexagram denotes joyousness and pleasure, and most people regard it as a good omen when they receive it. Yet, an analysis of the lines indicates that only the first two are particularly favorable, and the hexagram itself seldom seems to refer to anything remotely resembling joy in a typical oracle consultation. The lessons to be learned from the figure are the differences between self-indulgence and maintaining emotional stability in one's conduct of the work, which always demands a firm control over one's effects. To receive this hexagram without changing lines requires the querent's careful discrimination. It can mean simply, "Oh, happy day," or it can suggest that you examine an inclination toward lack of control in the situation at hand. The oracle is capable of brutal sarcasm when your query warrants it, so don't be too quick to accept the shallow meaning of joy. As often as not, self-indulgence is the more appropriate title. A quote from Lao Tzu. In light frivolity, the center is lost. In hasty action, self-mastery is lost. The image depicts an open interchange among friends. Intrapsychically, this suggests the normal give and take between thoughts and feelings for the purpose of reaching integration. The symbol of two bodies of water conjoined, blowfold, might refer to the adjacent dimensions of thought and emotion within the psyche. When feelings are not in harmony with intellectual differentiation, a common phenomenon, give and take, discussion and practice, is essential to effect integration, i.e. harmony or joy. Practice suggests cycles of time and the notion that perfection is still to be achieved. Slofnesy's seemingly anomalous title of usurpation for this hexagram offers some subtle insights into the symbolism here. Emotions, feelings, effects are often portrayed as demonic forces which usurp ego consciousness and indulge themselves in the joy of expressing whatever they happen to represent in the psyche. This is often what is implied when receiving this hexagram. A quote from Jung in Psychology and Religion. Each of us is equipped with a psychic disposition that limits our freedom in high degree and makes it practically illusory. Not only is freedom of the will an incalculable problem philosophically, it is also a misnomer in the practical sense, for we seldom find anybody who is not influenced and indeed dominated by desires, habits, impulses, prejudices, resentments, and by every conceivable kind of complex. All these natural facts function exactly like an Olympus full of deities who want to be propitiated, served, feared, and worshipped, not only by the individual owner of this assorted pantheon, but by everybody in his vicinity. Cleary's Taoist commentary, as water provides moisture for myriad beings, etc., supports this interpretation. Water symbolizes the emotional realm, and the myriad beings dwelling therein are emotional entities, creatures like untamed animals which are never happier than when running free. To them it's joy. To the executive function in the psyche, it's self-indulgence. Usurpation has taken place. And our supporting hexagram puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. James Dekorne calls hexagram 60 restrictive regulations. Other titles might be limitation, restraint, regulations, articulating, receipt, restraining, containment, judgment, leg. Restrictive regulations bring progress and success, but if they are severe and difficult, they cannot be permanent. Wilhelm/Baines, limitation, success. Galling limitation must not be persevered in. Blowfold, restraint, success. It is wrong to persist in harsh restraint. Liu, limitation, success. Bitter limitation should not be continued. Ritzema/Karcher, articulating, growing. Bitter articulating, not permitting trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confused relations. It emphasizes that making limits and connections clear, particularly through speech, is the adequate way to handle it. Slofnacy, receipt, withered moderation, one may not determine. Cleary 1, discipline is developmental, but painful discipline is not to be held to. Discipline means having limits that are not to be exceeded. This hexagram represents practicing obedience in unfavorable circumstances, adaptably keeping to the Tao. The situation may be up to others, but creation of destiny is up to oneself. When discipline gets to the point of inflicting suffering, it brings on danger itself, even where there was no danger. You will only suffer toil and servility, which is harmful and has no benefit. Wu, regulation indicates pervasiveness. Excessive regulation should not be obstinately pursued. Sometimes the meaning of conservation or moderation is implied. Although the idea of regulation is convincing, it should not be applied blindly without regard to conditions. The image, leg, water over a lake, the image of restrictive regulations. The superior man constructs methods of numbering and measurement and examines the nature of virtuous conduct. Wilhelm/Baines, water over lake, the image of limitation. Thus the superior man creates number and measure and examines the nature of virtue and correct conduct. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes water held in a dike above a marshy lake. The superior man employs a system of regulations in his plans for the widespread practice of virtue. Ritzema/Karcher, above marsh possessing stream, articulating. A chunsu, or chief son, or superior person, uses pairing to reckon the measures. A chunsu uses deliberating, actualizing Tao to move. Actualizing Tao is the ability to follow the course traced by the ongoing process of the cosmos, linked with acquire, D, acquiring that which makes a being become what it is meant to be. Wu, there is water above the marsh, this is regulation. Thus the Junzi, or chief son or superior person, enacts statutes and deliberates virtues. A study of the limits and merits will avert difficulties. Commentary. Confucius/Leg, progress and attainment are seen in the equally divided dynamic and magnetic lines, with the dynamic lines in the central places. If the regulations are severe and difficult, the course of action will come to an end. We see a cheerful attitude directing the course amidst peril. The rules are correctly initiated by the ruler in the fifth place. Heaven and earth observe their regular cycles and complete the 4 seasons. When rulers frame their laws according to just limitations, the resources of the state suffer no injury, and the people receive no hurt. Leg. The written Chinese character which denotes restrictive regulations means the regular division of a whole, such as the division of the seasons of the year into 90-day periods clearly marked by the solstices and equinoxes. Whatever makes regular division may be denominated by a restrictive regulation, and there enter into it the ideas of ordering and restraining. The hexagram deals with the regulations of government enacted for the guidance and control of the people. An important point is made that these regulations must be adapted to the circumstances and not made too strict and severe. Zheng Tzu says on the image, the water which a lake or marsh will contain is limited to a certain quantity. If the water flowing in exceeds that amount, it overflows. This gives us the idea of restrictive regulations. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. Restrictive regulations are necessary for growth, but severe restriction must itself be limited. The superior man differentiates his options in relation to the goals of the work. The work itself is nothing if not a rigid structure imposed upon one's life, a restrictive regulation of the ego's illusion of freedom of choice. Ordinary people insist that their lives are ordered by the intelligent exercise of free will, but this freedom is more commonly just a rationalization for the activity of autonomous complexes. No one can look objectively at the current state of the world and seriously claim that it reflects either rational order or balanced perception. Collective human experience on this planet is determined by the whims of archetypal forces expressing themselves through the unconscious psyches of 6 billion people. The work, then, is a restrictive regulation of these autonomous forces. It is a limitation, a containment of the expression of instinct and desire. We are reminded of the alchemical vessel, which is hermetically sealed to prevent its contents from escaping before they have been transmuted into gold. If the alchemist miscalculates his methods of numbering and measurement, the vessel becomes a kind of bomb. The seal breaks, the contents explode, and the work is ruined. This is what is meant by, if the regulations are severe and difficult, the course of action will come to an end. If we restrict the contents of the vessel beyond their capacity for confinement, the psyche boils over in some degree of rebellion. This is no minor thing. Depending on the circumstances, severe psychotic reactions can be created in this manner. On the other hand, the ego thinks that all but the most minor restrictions are severe and difficult, and it is constantly on the verge of rebellion. As always, it is the self, capitalized self, which must determine how far the restrictive regulations can be taken. From its perspective outside of space-time, it is best able to determine how much pressure the psyche can take. Frequently, it is far more, or sometimes far less, than the ego thinks possible. The Confucian commentary observes, we see a cheerful attitude directing the course amidst peril. This refers to the lower trigram of cheerfulness encountering the upper trigram of peril or danger. The restrictions of the work are more often than not unpleasant and risky, constantly verging on some kind of an explosion. An attitude of cheerful acceptance enables one to survive these difficult trials. This is an extremely important concept because without it, one can all too easily fall into a suicidal despair. The work can become an impossible burden unless one learns how to approach stress and hardship with an almost irreverent sense of humor. This in itself is an essential lesson about how to purge the ego of its myopic notions of what it will and will not accept in life. There is an old Zen proverb that says, hell also is a place to live in. The message is clear. Be of good cheer, because without it, you are sure to fail. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. The seeming inevitability of conflict among the archetypal powers can cause us to experience life as a hopeless, senseless impasse. But the conflict can also be discovered to be the expression of a symbolic pattern still to be intuited. It can be lived as if it were a drama. the play of life or of the gods, for the purpose of experiencing an ultimate meaning. When one can feel with Goethe, I know I've seen that, but I don't know how to pronounce it, that everything transient is but a symbol, then meaning can be found not only in creativity, joy and love, but also in impasse, suffering and conflict. Then life can be lived as a work of art. We'll now go back to our primary hexagram and read changing line 4, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here's some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of our reading. Changing line 4 has the general context, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. James Dekorne calls again hexagram 58 joy or self-indulgence. Changing line 4, leg. The fourth line dynamic shows its subject deliberating about what to seek his pleasure in, and not at rest. He borders on what would be injurious, but there will be cause for joy. Wilhelm/Baines, joyousness that is weighed is not at peace. After ridding himself of mistakes, a man has joy. Blofeld, calculating future joys. He is restless and suffers from various small ills, yet he is happy. Lou, considering joyousness does not bring serenity. Once one corrects his conduct, one has joyousness. Ritzema/Karcher, bargaining, opening, not yet soothing, chain mail, afflicting, possessing, rejoicing. Slofnessy, patterned usurpation, not yet at peace. A transitional illness has happiness. Cleary 1, joy after deliberation. If one is firm and wary without complacency, there will be happiness. Cleary 2, deliberating about delight, one is uneasy. If one is firm and swift, there will be happiness. Wu, he is not at ease in pondering about joyousness, but he is glad to be able to distinguish what is correct from what he despises. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, the joy in connection with the subject of the fourth line is due to the happiness which he will produce. Wilhelm/Baines, the joy brings blessing. Blofeld, there will be happiness in spite of this foolish anxiety, because blessings, i.e. unexpected or seemingly unmerited happiness, will be received. Ritzema/Karcher, possessing reward indeed. Cleary 2, celebration. Wu, there is something to celebrate. Leg, the bordering on what is injurious has reference to the contiguity of line 4. I'm not sure. I've never seen that word, I don't think. To the magnetic third line. That might have an injurious effect, but he reflects and deliberates before he will yield to the seduction of pleasure, and there is cause for joy. Anthony, in addition to the more literal meanings of this line, pleasure also means departing from our limits to indulge our self-importance, power, correctness, wit, intelligence, skill, sharpness, or independence. Such luxuries of attitude are against our inner nature and create self-conflict. Notes and paraphrases. Sue. Indecision regarding the choice among pleasures temporarily robs the man of inner peace. After due reflection, he attains joy by turning away from the lower pleasures and seeking the higher ones. Wing. You are suffering from indecision based upon a choice between inferior and superior pleasures. If you recognize this and then choose the higher and more constructive form of pleasure, you will find true happiness. Above all, make your decision soon. Editor. Two kinds of joy are contrasted here. Desire indulged versus desire mastered, and the line depicts ambivalence about which one you'll choose. If this is the only changing line, the hexagram becomes number 60, restrictive regulations, with a corresponding line that counsels the acceptance of limitation as productive of peace of mind and contentment, shows its subject quietly and naturally attentive to all regulations, there will be progress and success. A quote from W.E. Evans Wentz in Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines. By reflecting upon the uselessness of aimlessly frittering away thy life, mayest thou be incited to diligence in the treading of the path. James Dekorne breaks changing line 4 down into one possible succinct definition. A. Rid yourself of ambivalence by accepting the limitations demanded by the work. Yield not unto temptation. Now get a randomly card drawn verse from the Tao Te Ching while we sum this reading up. Hexagram 58, joy or self-indulgence was one of the titles that James Dekorne gave it. Shows dewy lake or marsh above dewy lake or marsh, which is the trigram that represents joy. So it's joy doubled, joy inward and outward. And when those correspond, if it's correct, then there's joy everywhere. However, a lot of the changing lines, all but 2 of them are inauspicious. The first and second are auspicious, at least according to James Dekorne's take on it, and the rest are not. The supporting hexagram 60, regulation, discipline, puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Shows con, water, which is dark, flowing and formless, and represents danger, almost like the psyche, the depths of the psyche, is above lake and marsh, which is danger above joy. And said that most people are not able to be joyous in both adverse and happy situations. And so that is the goal, to be able to maintain inner joy regardless of the circumstances externally. And it also had to do, I believe, with having joy in practicing the Tao. Actually, that was from the first one. That if we set our joy on practicing the Tao, that is profitable. So the first hexagram shows joy. The second has discipline. And what's interesting about that is our changing line 4, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 4 of hexagram 58, joy, shows that there is danger externally, essentially, and that it's of utmost importance to be firm and correct, and to I almost want to say protect the inner joy from the danger that's going on, and to make sure that it's set on the right things. And that would be a way to make joy last and get us through all the things that we need to. Because in the restriction, it talked about restrictions are good in many cases. They can help us plot a course and measure things correctly, because the idea is that all this water on top of a lake can flood the lake and it will overflow. And so if you know the right measures, then you can kind of accommodate for changing circumstances, because you kind of know where things will spill over if you're not careful. So you want to have that always in mind. And I'll also just think I got some really great info out of Hilary Barrett. What she talked about these. The image of 2 lakes joined together in Hexagram 58, which she calls opening, she says, two joined lakes open to one another, flow together freely and enrich one another. The same is true of friends who join together to discuss and share their understanding. The exchange of ideas and pooling of insights makes everyone richer. It talked about in I-ming's Taoist I Ching that when we have people to practice the Tao with, one person has a limited understanding and several people bring their own understandings to the table, and that allows us to practice the Tao in a way where we advance rapidly. We can discuss the ins and outs of it, how one might proceed on the way, that way being something that's almost as if changing constantly under our feet, but with a good measuring tool, such as a map might be, and a compass. In fact, Benabel Wen, she talks about how the I Ching is the compass, and if we're ever confused on how to use it, we need to turn to the map, quote unquote, of the Tao Te Ching, which was interesting. So basically, having the correct measures is of no use if we don't understand them or practice them. And so this joyousness of being in the companionship of others on the path is incredibly helpful for all involved. And it involves the trigram joy is open exchange of communication, both inner and outer, and brings joy with everybody communing together. Hexagram 60, she calls measuring. It says in the image, the streams flow into the lake and out from it, but how much water can the lake hold? Or how many channels can we dig leading out from it before there is insufficient water to reach our fields? A noble one will work out these limits to capacity and flow by discovering what works in practice. He is like the lake that reflects and deepens, and like the streams that flow out and reveal a character's depth and resource through action. And then I'll read changing line 4 because I thought that was good as well in this. Negotiating opening, not yet at rest. Containing the affliction brings rejoicing. You're considering and discussing a change, and you want to settle all the details before you commit yourself, so you can be sure of how things will work and more confident that you're making the right decision. You're also under great pressure to decide. This magnifies your restlessness into deep anxiety unless you set some limits to this. It will tend to take over and turn the negotiations into obsessive haggling. If you rest secure in the knowledge of what you want and need, you can reach your decision calmly in your own time. You'll also find that participating in the interplay of negotiation enriches you, and the dance of exchange is something you can enjoy. The 15th chapter, or verse rather, is what we'll be reading from the Tao Te Ching to close things off, and my copy is by Jia Fu Feng and Jane English. Verse 15 in the Tao Te Ching. The ancient masters were subtle, mysterious, profound, responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. Watchful like men crossing a winter stream, alert like men aware of danger, courteous like visiting guests, yielding like ice about to melt, simple like uncarved blocks of wood, hollow like caves, opaque like muddy pools. Who can wait quietly while the mud settles? who can remain still until the moment of action? Observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change.